tabs are a tool in InDesign that allow us to line things up in really specific ways. So let's say I had a document like this, and I wanted the numbers to line up and justify right against the sort of column edge over here. The really naive way to do this is to just start putting spaces in. And I actually see people do this all the time, but it's really not the right way to work. For one, it just takes longer to put all these spaces in. But you'll also find that it's impossible to get things to line up perfectly. See that this isn't lining up perfectly, and if I try to put another space, now it's going a little bit too far, and so there's a bit of a ragged edge here. That's because a lot of characters are not the same width as other characters, so you're always going to end up with this issue. Not to mention, if I adjust the font size of this, now I'm going to have to go back and fix the spacing so that it is correct to that font size. So this is really not the right way to work, and you definitely want to avoid using the spacebar to create spacing like that. So what you want to use instead is called the tab key, and if you've worked with programs like Microsoft Word, you might have used this before, and you can insert tabs by actually hitting the tab key on the keyboard. Okay, so when I hit the tab key on each of these, you can see that it's actually a tab character. This is one character that's creating all this space. And a good way to see those tab characters is to show hidden characters. So you can do that by going up to type and down to show hidden characters. This will allow you to see all of the hidden things that are inside of your text field. So for instance, this little dot means that there's a space. This character means that there's a tab, and this character means that there's a paragraph return. Okay, so this helps you see where those tabs are. So this is already working pretty well. We've got some text that's lining up. But one issue that you'll find is we still need to move these numbers over to the right side. And if we insert more tabs, okay, we're going to run into the same issue where things aren't quite hitting where we want them to hit. We can start putting spaces in, but again, we're running into the same issue that we were running into before. So what we can do in InDesign is have really granular control over where those tabs are placed, which will allow us to line things up. Okay, so let's go back to just having one tab for each of these characters. Generally speaking, you don't want to have two tabs in a row. It's usually best to just have one tab and adjust the spacing of that tab. Okay, so let's bring up what's called the tab window, and I can do this by selecting that text field, and I'm going to hit Shift, Command, and T. Okay, and the tab window works a little bit different than other windows because it sort of glues to the top of the text box. So you can see that it's sort of fixed to the top of that text box. And one thing to think about when you're using tabs is when you bring up that window, you want to make sure the top of the text field is shown and is available. Otherwise, the tabs aren't going to glue to that window. So for instance, if I close the tab window and just bring my viewport down a bit where I can't see the top of the text frame and hit Command Shift T again to bring up tabs, now the tab window is not glued to the text field. And that's because I wasn't able to see it, and so it wasn't able to put it where it wanted to put itself. Okay, but if you ever do this, you can always hit the magnet key once you do bring the window back into position, and that'll position it again at the top of the text field. So just know that the tabs window works a little bit differently, but it does that for a very good reason, which is that this ruler is actually aligned to the text field, and the ruler is going to allow us to place what's called tab stops at very specific points. Okay, so by default, these tabs are sort of moving a certain amount, and they're all lining up within a certain interval. But if we put a very specific tab stop in here, it's actually going to work a little bit differently. Okay, so let's go ahead and select the entire text frame again so that the tab stop applies to everything. And then if I click this little strip above the ruler, I can put in a tab stop. So if I click and hold down, you can see that there's a little line. That line is telling me where the tab stop is going to be located. Okay, and you can see that when I insert the tab stop, everything lines up to that tab stop. Okay, I can click and drag and move this around, and that's going to control where the characters actually land on that tab stop. Okay, there's different types of tab stops that you can work with. There's a left justified tab stop, and if I highlight this tab stop and click on left justified, you can see that now all the text is sort of going to the right of that tab stop. That's because they're aligning with a left justification. can also choose center. Okay, now all this text is going to align to the center, or right. And with right, obviously it's going to use right justification against that tab stop. Okay, so now that I have right justified, which is what I want in this case, I can click and move this tab stop over to the location that I want it. You can see all the text moves to the correct place. So that's how tabs work. Do make sure that you're working with the entire window, or that you have all the paragraphs selected that you want to edit. Because let's say I just have my cursor in this one place, and I start to move these tabs around, you can see that it's only affecting that one paragraph. That's because the rules for tabs are paragraph specific. Okay, so let's undo that. And if I wanted to make a change, the better way to do it would be to go back to the selection tool, select the entire text box, and now I can make changes to all the paragraphs at once. You can also put in multiple tab stops. So let's say I had another number after this one, let's say 05, and I wanted the 05 to sort of move to this next column. Okay, what I can do is, again, make sure that the entire text box is selected, and let's put in another tab stop right over here, and this tab stop is right justified again, which is what I want. Okay, now if I go and put my cursor in between these numbers and hit the tab key, okay, this tab character is going to force this number to jump to the next tab stop, which is exactly what I want. So you can see that you can work with multiple tabs. Maybe you're doing something in your menu where you have multiple sizes for small, medium, and large, and tabs can help you, get all those things to line up in the right way. There's one more feature of tabs that is good to know about, which is called the leader. Okay, so let's go ahead and select this again, and I'm going to delete this extra tab stop and just go back to my sort of simple tab stops here. You can always remove tab stops by just clicking on them and dragging off of the little strip. Okay, so click and drag off, and then I'll remove the tab stop. Oops, I accidentally removed the number, so let me put that back. Okay, so what you can do is create a leader. So if I select this tab stop over here, there's a field called the leader, and the leader will allow you to insert a character that's going to fill the space where the tab is occupying. Okay, so a common thing to put in leader is the dot character. Okay, so if I put dot and then hit tab to kind of apply that leader, okay, now you can see that it's filling up this space with dots. You could also do things like space dot. Okay, that's going to put a dot and a space between each one. And so just know that the leader is going to fill up that space and repeat what's ever in this window over and over again. All right, so I've got our menu open here, and let's say that instead of having our prices be on their own separate line, I wanted them to come up and be in a nice, neat column next to the menu items. Okay, so in order to do that, I'm going to use tabs. So let's go ahead and put our cursor before the 8 and press backspace to remove that paragraph break. Okay, but before we do this, there's one thing that we need to consider, and that's the fact that we have separate paragraph styles for our price and for our menu items. If I go to paragraph styles, you can see that the menu item has a paragraph style, and the price has its own paragraph style. But when I remove the paragraph break between these two, these are actually technically the same paragraph now. So there's something weird happening here, because technically these should be the same style since they're the same paragraph, and they're part of the menu item paragraph style. But what is going on is there's something called an override. So if I select this 8, okay, you can see that this is technically a menu item in terms of its paragraph style, but there's a little plus next to menu item. That means that there are some overrides that are sort of taking over the default styles of that paragraph style. So if I select this part of the text, you can see that it's just a regular menu item. There's no plus, so there's no override being applied to the black and white hummus. But when I select the 8, that little plus pops up, and that's telling me that there are some overrides. That's what's causing the difference between the style of this and the style of this, even though they're in the same paragraph. Okay, so if I highlight this 8 and click this little button down here, it's a little paragraph symbol and a little slash next to it. This is a button that allows me to clear those overrides. Okay, so if I click this, you can see that now the 8 is the same style as the rest of this menu item. The reason for that is because I cleared that override, and so now this is just a regular menu item paragraph style, and it has no difference from the rest of what's going on here. Okay, so that's a little trick about, what happens in paragraph styles. And let's say we wanted this 8 to have a different style, okay, but we didn't want to set it up with an override each time. And we could just override this. If we went up to our font and changed this to Gotham Black, okay, it's going to go back to that heavier weight. But we would have to do that with each price individually, so it's not the best way to set up our document. So what we want to do instead is use what's called a character style. And a character style is a good way to create a separate style for some specific characters within a paragraph style. Okay, so let's go ahead and highlight this 8, and we'll go ahead and make it the font way we want. Let's make it Gotham Bold. Okay, so currently this is an override, and you can see when I highlight it, there's that little plus. But this time, instead of clearing that override, what I'm going to do is go up to Character Styles and create a new character style. So generally speaking, you want to use paragraph styles, but character styles are good whenever you want a style kind of within your paragraph style. So let's go ahead and create a new style for that. You can see character style 1 pops down. Let's edit that character style, bring it over. We'll call this price. Okay, and you can see that Gotham Bold is inputted into price. So now when I click OK, we have a character style for price. And when I go over to the black and white hummus, the character style says none. So instead of this just being a regular override, it's actually being overridden by the character style, which is a better way to do it, because now we can use that character style to apply that to all the prices moving forward, and that's going to be a more sustainable way to create styles within our document. And now you can see that the override is no longer there because this is technically not an override anymore, it's a character style. Okay, so now that that is set up correctly, let's go ahead and put in our tab character. So I'm going to hit tab, and you can see that that little tab character got inputted. It's really small in this case, but since I have hidden characters turned on, I can see that that little double arrow is a tab key. Okay, so that is a tab, even though it's really small, it is there. All right, and this time, instead of selecting the whole window and hitting Shift Command T to bring up the tab window, let's do it a little bit differently. We're going to do it in the actual paragraph style itself. This is a better way to work in this case because we're really working with a bunch of different styles, and we want the tabs to be specific to each of these different paragraphs. Okay, so let's go into our menu item paragraph style, and remember, make sure that you don't have this whole text box selected, because if I do that and I click on menu item, I'm going to accidentally apply the menu item paragraph style to the entire window. So let's undo that and just make sure that you don't have anything selected when you go in and edit the paragraph style. Okay, so we're editing the menu item paragraph style. Let's go down to the tabs tab over here. And this looks really similar to that tabs window. We have a ruler, we have a little space above the ruler, and that little space is where we're going to put our tab stops. So let's use a right justified tab stop, and we'll just sort of place that into the right location. Okay, and once we move that into the right place, you'll see our text will line up really nicely. The single tab is causing all that space to span in between here, and now we're nice and set up. Okay, we could also put a leader in here if we wanted to, but in this case I don't want a leader, so I'm just going to leave that blank. Okay, so let's go ahead and click OK. So now for all of our menu items, we have that same tab style applied. So if I go to the crispy Brussels sprouts, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this 8. Okay, and then I'll put an 8 in here, hit the tab key. It's going to shoot right over to exactly where we want it. And then I can highlight that 8 and apply the character style for price. Okay, so now this is formatted correctly, and this is going to be a system that I can use for the rest of my entire document. Okay, so I'm not going to go through and apply all those, but just know that tabs can be applied to paragraph styles. Often that's the best way to work, and that character styles are there for you where you want to put a style sort of within a style. And remember that paragraph styles are generally what you want to use, but character styles are good if you want just a few characters within a larger paragraph style to be styled differently.